11:35 in iPhone time, so this is close to synchronization as we have in the world. My name is Neil Block and I'm with EBSCO. I'm Vice President of Open Source Innovation, and so we've got a great panel today to talk about a project called FOLIO, which is a community coming together to build an open source library services platform that provides core library functionality, but can also be extended beyond that. So I'm going to tee it up for a couple of minutes and turn it over to my colleagues. We will allow some time for questions as we go on, so we'll look forward to this being an interactive session. The backdrop of this project really takes place against a marketplace that is in rapid consolidation. So for libraries that are looking for an integrated library system or library services platform, the marketplace has shrunk considerably over time. If you were looking for a system 5 years ago, you would have more choices, or 10 years ago, many more choices than are available right now in the marketplace. So that's not a great option for libraries. We work with many, many libraries at EBSCO, so we get that feedback that libraries would like more choice. The second component of this is not only is there less choice in the ILS or library services platform market, it's when you select a library services platform that many of these applications are becoming more monolithic in nature, a walled garden of applications that lead you into a selection for multiple products and services from the same vendor or supplier, even when the library may choose to go for a more disaggregated or best-of-breed approach. So we don't think that that's super great. And I would say for EBSCO, we've got a couple of motivations in this project. One is EBSCO is a philanthropic organization. It's a family-owned organization. It's not a private equity-owned company. So part of this is really a technology donation to a broad library community that consists of libraries around the world. So that's part of it. Second, we have a very good business interest. We've got EDS, our discovery service. We have a lot invested in EDS, and we would like there to be equality of choice, regardless of the library system you choose. Remember back when discovery was started and invented, it was you could switch the ILS and keep your user experience and make those decisions independently. We'd like to see that come back. Also, one of the things that we've been thinking about a lot, and I'm going to borrow a slide that a consultant in the UK named Ken Chad put together as part of a presentation about platforms and a platform revolution. So I think we can look at library systems in a broader context of what happens in the computing world at large. So within what we would call, and I think it goes back to the point that not enough attention has been paid to the word platform when we talk about library services platform. The value of a platform, here as it's written in this book, Platform Revolution, really comes from the value created by partners who are external to that platform. So that's a real interesting concept. So rather than building monolithic applications where everything's delivered by a single supplier, opening up to a community leads to a very broad, rich experience. And so I will point this out in a simple slide. So here's Amazon. They have a device, it's called the Echo. It's really kind of a simple, stupid little device, right? It doesn't do that much. It understands your voice, it ties to many different things. But the value of Echo comes from non-Amazon sourced apps. You can turn your lights on and turn your lights off. You can order pizza or call Uber, play music. You can also do stuff with Amazon. They certainly are wired into it. But it's the value of this large community that comes into the platform. I've heard the term recently calling it the invisible platform. And I think that's kind of what we're all moving toward, isn't it? A world where there's very little friction. And this is a word that Mike Winkler, who's talked about later, is often used, that there's less friction, whether it's between data or between services. So I will just end on this slide to describe FOLIO and give a little context for the conversation that will come later. First of all, it is an open source library services platform. So by that, we mean it's licensed under an Apache license. It's very permissive. Other organizations can take the software and use it for a variety of purposes. It is a not-for-profit, and the governance of the FOLIO project is run by a group called the Open Library Foundation. So it's very important that although EBSCO supports FOLIO financially to get things up and going, its governance is managed by a completely separate organization called the Open Library Foundation. This is a global collaboration of libraries and of different vendors as well, consortia and individuals. So that's what makes it different, maybe than a lot of cases, is we welcome in the for-profit community. Because as we look at the applications that can be run and developed against this platform, there will be a variety. Many will be open source. They'll be at no cost for the software. But many will be provided by commercial suppliers. So you could pay a little bit a year for a particular application to plug in this platform if you think that's a good way to go. And really create the customized solution that you want and need for your library. So FOLIO is built on a modern platform. If we were starting up a company today and we had a great idea for an application, probably what we would do is look for a platform first. A platform gives common infrastructure, such as the persistent data layer, the API gateway, and the user interface toolkit. So it gives you the core parts that you can leverage to build your really cool application. So it removes or lowers the barrier of entry for application development. As I mentioned, this will be a library services platform. It will do things that are traditional to libraries: acquisition, circulation, cataloging, ERM. But it's also designed to be a very extensible platform to take the applications into other parts of the campus and library community that the ILS or the LSP does not currently occupy. The last part is we are going to create a marketplace, and as I mentioned, that marketplace will be open. The software is transparent. It's available on GitHub right now, so you can participate in the community. So I would invite you to join. Folio.org is the website. Please come in and participate, lend your thoughts. There's a number of ways you can participate. For libraries that have developers, sure, you can do development on platform or applications. But most of us are not developers. I'm a librarian. I have interest in library systems, how they work. So you can lend your voice to the conversation that's going on, whether it has to do with strategic areas or functional areas of the future of FOLIO. So I invite you to take a look at us, folio.org. I'm going to turn it over to Tania right now, and she'll discuss how FOLIO could fit into small libraries. Thank you very much.
Good morning. I very rarely use a microphone, so let me know if I'm not doing it right. I've also not done one of these for what feels like a million years, so I'm like nervous, and I have notes, unlike my colleagues here. I'm going to say
prepared. She's totally prepared.
That's possible. So I'm here to say a few short words about what I see as the potential for FOLIO in what I'm calling a small shop. So I'm Tania Fersenheim. I'm the Content and Applications Manager at Fenway Libraries Online, which is a consortium of 10 small academic libraries in downtown Boston, and some of which are very, very specialized. So we don't have a lot of commonality between the needs of all 10 libraries in our consortium. Before I was at Fenway, very recently I was the manager of library systems at Brandeis University. And that was another place. In both of these places I had a very small group of people who were working on a large number of systems. And best case scenario, we have one person who does some development, and they're really never going to be doing development full time. So what, we have like maybe a quarter of a person tops for doing development. So choosing between commercial and open source is a continual tension in my line of work and in every organization, but especially in a small shop. I'm not going to go into an exhaustive list of pros and cons of commercial versus open source, but I would like to touch briefly on a small number of the pros for each side of the argument that I feel are particularly compelling for my situation. For commercial, the cost of the software is often easier to justify. A major barrier to adopting open source in a small shop is that it typically shifts your big costs from software to people. People costs are much harder to justify when you're trying to get budget commitment for something. Implementation, training, support, having access to staff who know the software really well. They can install it, they can train us on it, and access to documentation that we don't have to write ourselves and that theoretically was written by a professional person who does documentation. And also, there's something nice about having someone in charge. There's someone other than us who's ultimately responsible for making sure that the software works. Someone that we can turn to when something is broken and say, fix it. Those things combine to make, in my opinion, a small staff a little less affected by staff turnover. We're not, OSS can be unsustainable in a really small team. We're not all interchangeable cogs. We have different skills and abilities, and it only takes one of us leaving for a new job to torpedo a project. Having a vendor to fall back on when you have a temporary staff shortage can be a lifesaver. On the open source side of the house, I'm going to contradict myself right here and say that the fact that there's no upfront purchase price is actually a pro. People time is less obvious as money being spent than paying an invoice. So sometimes that argument is really compelling for, making a decision to implement open source. Flexibility. We can make the software do what we want it to do. If we don't like a feature, we can change it. If there's a feature missing, we can add it. If a bug's not getting fixed fast enough, we can fix it ourselves. And all of this can be done without competing with our colleagues in other libraries to get our local needs met. The user group enhancement process can be fairly lengthy, and specialized libraries will often come out the other end of it still not having what they really need. So one thing I didn't put on here is autonomy, and there's definitely a movement afoot in the software industry to move everything to the cloud. Adobe Creative Suite, Office 365, I'm going to pick on Ex Libris Alma a little bit, even though it's a nice product. Relinquishing local control over your software can be problematic. When you no longer have control over when something gets upgraded, what gets installed, where your data lives, and who has access to see and touch your data. So, new page. Obviously, choosing between commercial and open source can be difficult. Each has some major benefits and some major drawbacks. But FOLIO has me asking, what if I don't have to choose? FLOW, that's Fenway Libraries, is currently a shared ILS consortium with all the benefits and drawbacks that come with that. When we're thinking about migrating to a new ILS, we're asking ourselves things like, would hosted or locally installed be better? Would we want to go with something that's multi-tenant or single-tenant? Do we want to continue to commingle all of our data across all 10 libraries, or do we want something more siloed? Would we want a situation where we can commingle some of our data but not all of our data? So say we want to share all of our bibliographic and item data with each other, but we want to really lock down our financial data. With traditional ILSs, our needs in these areas define the list of systems that we can choose from. FOLIO removes that particular constraint. I think FOLIO can be on the list regardless of what our needs are in those areas. A small shop committed to open source lives or dies on its ability to hire and keep a single developer or a quarter of a developer. We could opt for doing some development ourselves, doing hands-on management when we had the people available to do that, and fall back on some sort of vendor support contract when we're underpeopled. We could get our needs addressed in a timely fashion. We could do it ourselves, we could pay someone to do it for us, or we could have a hackathon. Not having to compete against the needs of other libraries to get my local needs met is very, very compelling. So there are definitely some cynics out there who are grumbling about the notion that FOLIO can be all of the things the idea people say it can be. And they're grumbling that it's a unicorn. Well, I'm here to tell you that I believe unicorns are real. All right, this is the first time I'm seeing it on the large screen. I wasn't sure that the rainbow would really come through, but hopefully you guys can see this wonderful rainbow. We were in Iceland a few weeks ago, and we saw rainbows everywhere we went. Now, this could have been some really wonderful local weather phenomenon, or, since everyone knows that rainbows are actually unicorn poop, I choose to believe that it's evidence that unicorns exist. So, with that, since now we know that unicorns exist, what kind of unicorn am I looking for? I've touched a little bit on FOLIO's benefits in terms of the mechanics of installing and managing an ILS or a library system or library services platform, but I think beyond that are what I think of as the bigger questions and opportunities. With flexibility, I'm thinking along the lines of what if there's a platform that allowed a consortium like Fenway Libraries to run multiple CERC modules or cataloging modules so that each library that has specialized needs can meet those needs. What if we have the ability to write an app to meet a hyper-local need for a specialized library like the Museum of Fine Arts? A major systems vendor is unlikely to commit development time to something super specialized. So maybe we could make it ourselves instead. We talk a lot about collaborative collection management. We all know that our collections can't be comprehensive anymore, if they ever actually could be. Cooperative collection development and retention programs are springing up all over the place. Some of them are formal, some of them are ad hoc, some of them are long-term, some of them are short-term. But the data sharing and interchange for these types of endeavors is a challenge. And we keep finding ourselves wanting to use and reuse our data in ways that our ILS vendors haven't envisioned. Our vendors give us tools for exporting MARC records, but too often that's the only way that they sanction export and reuse of our own data. We need more access to our data unconstrained by the software vendor. I'm also seeing a reduction in the centrality of the ILS. A lot of core functions still need to occur, but more and more of our workflows are outside the ILS. Many of us already do our ordering in external systems. We manage patron authentication in external systems. And our software constrains our workflows. It always has, it probably always will to a certain extent. But we'd really like the opportunity to choose our own constraints. Librarians are also no longer just in the library biz. We're in the repository biz, the library management system biz, the data research data biz. We need a platform that enables us to connect the services we need to provide wherever those services live. I'm also seeing sort of a commoditization of ILS functionality. If ILS functions are kind of going the way of email, it's not how we check out a book or generate a purchase order that makes us us. It's not what sets us apart from the library down the road. So finally, I also see FOLIO as a major opportunity for us to make some contributions. We don't have to go outside our existing skill set to participate. We can learn a new language if we have a reason to do so, but we don't have to. If everything we currently code is in Perl, we can use Perl to code new things for FOLIO that we need to have included in our service portfolio. Small shops are often only resourced to be consumers of open source. A team the size of mine might be able to participate fully in this type of ecosystem. We could actually start to give back for all of the times that we've used open source software and benefited from the time and labor of other people. We're a small shop, and we have really big dreams. I will now turn it over to Scott.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming. I'm Scott Anderson from Millersville University, about an hour and a half west of Philadelphia, regional, mid-sized public institution. About 7,000 FTE, setting out in the rural country, lots of squirrels, all that kind of good stuff. And I am the entire systems department at my institution. So I guess we're under people, according to Tania's metric there. So this is what I do. Primarily handle content-related systems, things that handle transactions for users. but I am also a specialist for and work with students in a large number of departments: art, design, business, computer science, economics, mathematics. And I actually do provide research instructions for students in the field of mathematics, which was like a major breakthrough after only 10 years of trying. But one of the focuses at my institution has been sort of moving away from spending lots of time on these kinds of library operations, kinds of activities, as the institution as a whole has moved clearly into the realm of being very learner-centric. So a lot of my time is moving away from generally trying to make large systems work to we need to have some identifiable paybacks on exactly what you're going to be spending your time on, because I'm increasingly thrust into the, can I snap something in and get this to work in 2 or 3 days? Because I've got students that are asking for my time, or faculty members who are asking me to show up in class. So it's now becoming a very clear choice about, do I have time to consider this and configure this, yes or no? If yes, how long will that take? Because if it's too long, it's never going to happen because I've got demand elsewhere. So like I was saying, lots of instructional activities amongst myself, technically speaking, anybody else who's doing those kinds of things at my institution in the CMS, LMS, those kinds of things. I'm also responsible for all these adjacent technologies, content platforms, discovery services, linking, those kinds of things. And we've tried to focus very much on driving efficiencies so we can take what additional time we do have and analyze the kinds of content that's being used or not being used, acquisition options, resource sharing options. We're no longer interested in the systems for the systems. We're interested increasingly in the systems for what they will allow us to do or how we can configure or bend them. And I'm becoming a little bit more disposable in the sense of, yeah, that's too much work for no payback, given the other demands that are on my time and the things that students are asking for. So in the grand scheme of things, we're looking for things that will help us do the kinds of learner-related activities better. Not necessarily can we check out a book faster, because we know how to do that. The other things that we're looking at are budget and value propositions at our institution. We have not had a percentage increase to our materials budget in probably 8 or 9 years. So do the math. We're down 2 or 3% every year. So one of the ways that we've been able to sort of sustain ourselves in the content areas is by ripping costs out of our operational areas. Again, back to the drive for efficiencies and looking for things that do very specific things that help our workflow and improve our turnaround time, so we're spending less time on back office kinds of things and allowing and freeing up time for faculty members, librarians to be working with students. The objective here is to free up time to spend more time with students. We also are an institution that is seeing significant shrinking of our physical collections. So we are not as concerned about managing that over the long term. What's the phrase you use, Mike? A declining trend in the use of physical items. We do, however, have a very robust special collections that we will have for quite some time, so we'll need that. But as a practical matter, we're 100% electronic library at this particular point. We purchased 24 physical objects last fiscal year. 24. So those traditional ILS services that we've used, we use them very little, and our cost per transactions obviously are very high. So one of the ways that we're trying to get more content in front of students and improve services in our collection area is by really driving efficiency in operations. And one of the attractions that FOLIO brought to the table is the options that it brings, particularly in the areas of hosting. I don't know how many of you have these kinds of issues, but great. We can get numerous institutions or entities probably to host a FOLIO instance on our behalf. But as a state organization, we also have some significant contractual hurdles. So if we've already got a contract in place for somebody and we can add a service onto it, that's great. I don't have to go to the Attorney General's office to etch a new contract. So we do have synergies there. And it also, I think, over the longer term will improve the odds that we as an institution are paying for services and functionalities that are actually germane and useful to us. My institution is going through the process of moving from one commercial ILS to another commercial ILS, and I'm going to be forced to spend a lot of time to configure a lot of pieces of software that we will never use, but it's part and parcel of the ramp-up process. And it really is irritating to me that I'm going to spend a lot of time doing that and there will be absolutely no payback on that expenditure of time. We could live with a very stripped down implementation of the sort of traditional ILS. Literally, CERC, NSIP, Z3950, and we could have some discussion about whether we actually needed to do cataloging or not in our ILS or our library services platform. Okay? Back to the fact that we bought 24 things last year. We accessioned a couple hundred, but we only bought 24. Also, we'd also be in the position of contracting with third parties for actual specific deliverables when there's a community available to us. We don't have a lot of people that we can contribute on these kinds of things, and I won't say this too loudly. Are there anybody from my administration here? No. Sometimes getting money is easier than actually getting a person, so the ability to perhaps go out into the marketplace for hire and have somebody contribute something, and then we contribute it back into the Apache license. And if anybody else needs to use this, great, here, have it, knock yourself out. Not a big deal. The other thing I think that's important here with the community, I've done a lot of work in consortiums within my state, within the state system in Pennsylvania, and partnering with other institutions that have a like need independent of what the rest of the customer base is doing, I think has a significant amount of attraction in the sense that if I can get 2 or 3 or 4 people involved and we can put our heads together and come up with a deliverable, I don't need to worry about what everybody else is doing. If I want to invite 20 people, I can invite 20 people. But if I really want to do this with just a small number of people, that's an option, which is not typically the case with the more traditional monolithic kinds of approaches. We also have a product and software innovation center at my institution. So this also does provide, again, a very learning, teaching-centered opportunity for us to put some interns on, please give me a thing that does this. You've got 16 weeks, go. And we have some track record at my institution of putting high-performing students on those kinds of projects, which again gives them a very real-world experience and gives us a deliverable and something for them to put in their portfolio. Back to that sort of plug-and-play idea that if we're working with students or interns as part of an educational process and it just all goes south, congratulations, nobody else in the world needs to adopt that. And I would actually put an asterisk next to it saying, please don't use this. The other thing that I think an environment like FOLIO gives us is the ability to bring in resources, services, functionalities, ideas that frankly are from outside the library space. I have 2 teenagers, freshmen and sophomore in high school. They rent things from the library if they even know the term library. So in my mind, we're going to be looking at some mind share issues. I've had kids that my daughter was 13 before she used a post box. 13. First time she used a post box. And was startled to discover that you can buy music on media at one particular point in time. So just using my kids as an example, their perspective about what a library is and does is light years different from what mine was. And it's also light years different from what students are looking at right now. So I'm really looking for mechanisms that will allow us to plug into the broader community well outside of the library space. Start with the basics, work to the rest of the world, and see what kind of combinations we can put together that provide value to our users at our institutions. And with that, I think I've not used up all the time. All right, Mike Winkler is going to finish up with a little bit of how about getting engaged with the FOLIO community.
Right, so I'm Mike Winkler. I'm Managing Director for the Open Library Environment, OLE. Some of you may be familiar with our organization. We've been working for many years around open source library management tools, and we pivoted towards the FOLIO project to contribute our resources and energies into this project because it just matches a lot of the original intents and goals that OLE had. So yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about community here, and we're running right up against when we would like to open it up to questions. So I'm going to keep it really brief and just make a couple of points. When we talk about community, we really are talking about an entire ecosystem. We certainly are talking about librarians, but if you've attended some FOLIO presentations before, you've heard this phrase. It includes librarians, developers, designers, service providers, and vendors. And we're really trying to get at the whole the idea of the whole ecosystem that supports libraries and library functionality, information services, and the kind of work that we do in our libraries. But it really even begins to expand beyond that. We heard from some of our presentations this morning the idea that we want to move outside of the library. So community, in some ways, is a way of mitigating risk in your investment in the future. There's lots of work that you have to do. This is what I call those downtrending, declining trends or commoditized work that libraries do. You want to put your investments in the leading edge, in the things where you're trying to go. What are the important services that you're trying to build? That's where you want your staff, and that's where you want your dollars to be flowing as much as possible. Community helps because it amplifies the impact that you have. It's hard to get a person. It's hard to get the money for a person. It's hard to get money for these purposes. But whatever you get, you want to get the maximum return on it. And by investing in a community organization, by putting your dollars or your people alongside other people that are working towards goals, shared goals, you amplify their voice, you amplify their impact to achieve the things that you're trying to achieve because they're working with other people. We also really appreciate the diversity that it can bring, the diversity of thinking. And again, just looking at this panel, the characterization that your libraries, 10 libraries, don't even have that much in common. We've had comments about, well, what about public libraries? And public libraries tend to be very innovative, competitive kinds of organizations. There's real value in talking to these libraries and talking to them about the kinds of tools that are available to us, even if we're building a system that is designed to do the work, the traditional work that you might see in an ILS. It's good to have these conversations about what is it that we're trying to do, what are the differences between the way we are trying to approach this, and are there good ideas, is there a marketplace of ideas that we can pull together and try to innovate around some of these service opportunities that are out there. So the community is growing. I've heard at this conference a couple of things that I at least wanted to throw out is you don't have to be a developer. In fact, we're not so much looking for developers as we are for practitioners, for strategic thinkers and planners, service designers in FOLIO. If you look at the totality of the people who are engaged, only about 5 or 10% of the people engaged in FOLIO are developers. We're really looking for you to join in. So it's not so much about building software and understanding how databases work and all that sort of stuff. It's understanding what libraries do and what they need to do going forward. And that's the purpose of the community, is to build a forum for this, a place where we can have these conversations and discussions. To that end, we have set up at least the beginnings of constructs that we hope support the community and that conversation. And in some ways, that conversation is the most important product that will come out of this effort. Being able to get librarians and developers together, to have service providers in the room talking about the problems that we have and what potential approaches to solutions are important, or where we may collaborate, or where the differences are really important, and there will be some divergence there. But here's a list of channels that are available. They run the gamut of very passive, where you can receive information coming to you and just sort of sample, keep informed, all the way to Slack channels or real-time conversations between librarians, developers, designers, There sometimes are conversations that will rage on for 2 or 3 hours there. So if you get a little bit of time, you want to kill me, that's the right place to go. More likely, you'll be looking at discussion. Discuss.folio.org is a place where we take those ranging conversations and roll them up so that we capture the conversation, we capture the ideas that were in that conversation, and in many cases are putting together proposals that say, we think that library services should work in this kind of way, and solicit more feedback from the community to get ideas about that. And then the wiki is where we're really codifying those kinds of efforts. For developers, dev.folio, this is where you can go and see the code. This is where you can find documentation and find documentation on the software, but also find documentation on how to engage with the community as a developer. But really, the only thing you have to remember here is folio.org. It is sort of the hub of that set of channels, and from there you can get to anything that you need to get to around Folio. So there are a couple of other events going on. There's a likely lunch with Neil coming up right after this. And there's the Folio Lounge going on at Biblio Labs today and tomorrow, and we encourage you to attend. And with that, I'm going to open it up for comments or questions that you might have. Okay, that's not a slide I should show, is it?
Feel free to ask anything.
So we've been developing and primarily focusing on the platform part of it. There's code that's been released. It was released at the end of August. It's in our GitHub repository. People have downloaded and started looking at it. But it really doesn't look very much like a library system now. There's nothing that would say like circulation or cataloging or anything like that. The architecture of this system is, it's a platform, and then we're going to build modules. The comparison has been made to a smartphone where you have like an operating system, and then on top of that, there are some basic functions or capabilities like GPS or a camera or something like that. That's what we've been working on primarily now, and we're pivoting our developers towards beginning to work on functional modules. We'll have exemplar modules by the end of the year. And we're on track for a 2018 deliverable of some minimum capability to replace existing library functionality, existing library management functionality.
In the back.
I was wondering if you could speak to open source library solutions in the past, why maybe this is the time for a more successful open source library island?
So, great question. There are existing open source solutions. Why is Folio different? Why would this be a good opportunity? And I think the most apt comparison probably is Koha, which is a very successful community in its own right. It's been going for about 15 years. Started primarily as a public library system. The goal that this community had at its core was to start from a more academic library focus, which meant incorporating resource management as being a core utility or theme of the product, that you should be able to manage electronic, physical, and digital resources concurrently within very common workflows. Whereas in current open source systems like Koha, those are add-on modules that don't dovetail very well with the core parts of the application. So the goal here was really to rethink from an academic library perspective how we could use and leverage that resource management capability and make that part of the whole software that gets delivered. So that's sort of a short answer. I've got the much longer, more boring answer too, but great question. Yes? Yeah.
I know that you mentioned in the slides that you want us to collaborate with vendors, but that wasn't completely clear to me. What do you need from vendors in general?
Sure, so good question. And what about collaborating with vendors? And I don't know, Mike, do you want to take that, or I'm going to have It's a danger just leaving me at the microphone, so it's like, okay, awesome. I think the diversity of the community is fantastic. So if you look at FOLIO as building a global community, if you are a vendor, a commercial supplier of an ILS, there might be multiple ways in which they could participate with FOLIO. First of all, we, EBSCO, have relationships with about 60 ILS companies around the world. Many of those companies are in a particular geography. They're quite small. If we brought to them a platform, an open source platform for their next generation system that they can build and localize for their constituent libraries, they can have another 10 years or 15 years of their service organization. If you have a successful commercial company, we could possibly represent new territories that they could sell apps into. More vendors are building component pieces of their software as apps that they might want to plug in or adapt into the platform. The third way I could see a vendor participating are those vendors who have hosting or SaaS capabilities and would want to become a service provider for an open source solution. I know Cersei Dynix has indicated their interest in providing that and leveraging their hosting and SaaS capabilities and maybe providing open source hosting in addition to their other businesses. So there's a number of ways in which a commercial provider could participate.
As a mid-tier academic, I would be looking at certain vendors that we've dealt with in the past to say, this is where we're going, keep this in mind, be aware of this. I might very well be asking for you to plug into this as part of a deliverable that I would ask for. I'm having conversations with a number of vendors right now, and one of them sitting in the back, perhaps about, could we use a repository? And it would be really great if your repository, which I really like, works with this, because this is the direction in which we're moving. And again, it leverages the kinds of things that we would put in this repository to be able to expose that through other venues, because now I only have to deal with it once. I'm sort of plugging it into the platform, and then I can let the platform sort of do whatever it is that I've plugged into elsewhere without me having to manage all those relationships.
And my response to that is, and this goes for all of the people we're trying to bring to the community, is we're looking for innovation. The cost of entering into a market like this is technically very high. And what we're trying to do is lower that barrier of entry, and we heard a little bit of that from Neil, is to make it possible for small shops who have really good ideas or who are working with libraries that are articulate about innovation that they need, to move software into production much more easily by using the Forden Systems platform. We're looking for libraries who are being asked to do lots more by their institutions and their current generations of systems, or even just the mindset of library technology in general, don't really provide them the solutions that they need. We talked a little bit about going outside of our libraries. There are other industries out there that are doing things that engage with your institutions around research management, about teaching and learning management, that are valuable to what libraries' agendas are going forward. So we're looking for that innovation. We're trying to make it attractive to them to be able to come in and provide the kinds of functionalities that libraries can articulate well. And I think we're out of time.
Yeah.
7. People are filtering out. But we are available for more questions. Certainly, if you see people walking around with buttons that say, ask me about FOLIO, ask them about FOLIO. Please come to the FOLIO Lounge if you have interest. It'll be casual and fun. Thank you.